Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I make clinical laboratory science content videos every single week, and if you are interested in that type of content, then consider subscribing to my channel, ring that bell to get notified, and let's get started. Welcome to my sophomore year of college, and let's just say this was the transition year. My university wanted to transition from a June start of classes to August, and to aid in that transition, what my school did was to add 2 intersemesters in between the second semester and the first semester. Second semester ended like March-ish, and first intersemester, which is the first summer class, supposedly started on April, May, and then they did another intersemester, which is June, July. After these 4 months would be August, which is my first semester in second year, my actual semester in second year. By the way, if you haven't seen my freshman year content, then go watch that video first because it wouldn't make sense how this 4-part series would work. So let's get to it. So on intersemesters, we are only allowed to take 9 units of classes. The first course that I took was Komunikasyon sa Akademikong Pilipino 1, which is basically Filipino 1. So we learned about the history of the Filipino language, and we learned about subject-verb agreement and identify which are the nouns, which are the prepositions. We also had to memorize a certain speech. I forgot this specific literature that we had to memorize and present in class. I think it's more of a declamation piece. So there's a little drama mixed into there. To be honest, I'm not really good at memorizing stuff, and I remember like what happened was that I was confident when I was in front of the class. I was speaking my whole piece, but then there was this point in the piece where I just like froze and I forgot all the words. Luckily, I have this really good friend of mine who was just across the room, and she was mouthing the words. She was like doing, I don't know, at that moment I just like froze. I don't know what to do. I got scared maybe, but thank God for that friend. Another good thing that happened in this class is that after our final exam, my professor was like, you know what? Let's have a chicken party. I mean, who doesn't like that? He paid like 3 or 2 buckets of like 16-piece chicken from Jollibee. Of course, it had to be Jollibee because Filipino. I really had fun in that class, and I also met friends that are from different departments because it's a general education class. So second subject that I took was General Physics 1, lecture and laboratory. I learned so many things here, and to be honest, I may not be the best in math, but studying for a math or like computation kind of subject, it's easier in my opinion. It's like before coming in, you have to memorize the formula, maybe solve a little problem sets, and like prep yourself what's coming, and that's it. Because you cannot really memorize answers for math because that's not how it works. You have to go there, apply the formulas that you know, and then gauge how much you know about physics. So that's pretty much what happened in physics. I had a really fun time, especially the laboratory part. We had this weird launcher thingy where we launch a marble and then we had to compute for the trajectory or something like that. I remember on our final exam, my professor was like, you know what? I don't want to give y'all a final exam, and we were like so happy about that. What we ended up doing instead was like we still had to show up because attendance is our final exam. So we showed up and then we just had a pizza party. That was fun. Well, I guess it's a little scary if you had really bad grades during like the preliminary exam, the midterm exam, and the pre-final exam, but like if you did well, which I sort of did, then you're gonna get a good grade. During my final exam, we also had this one classmate who always rode his bike to class, and when we were eating pizza, so I was like vulnerable. I told my friend who always rides the bike, you know, I'm always amazed by people who can ride the bike because I never learned. And then they were like mind blown. They're like, oh my gosh, Matt, that's like something a child should know. And I was like, well, my parents got me a bike when I was a kid, but it always had training wheels and I just never bothered taking it off. So during our final exam, when everyone just had to be present, we went out because outside our building was like this big patch of grass, and a handful of the people I met during that class taught me how to ride a bike. That's the most memorable moment during my physics lecture and lab. It's not related to physics at all, but it was fun. And plus, it's a summer class. I mean, there's only 2 months to cram all that information in, so better make the most out of it. I learned physics, and then I also learned how to ride a bike. I took 3 subjects, and the first one is logic with critical thinking, and in this class I just like memorize a lot of facts, and my professor really loves giving rebus puzzles. I would put examples of rebus puzzles right here. That's pretty much my learning with logic with critical thinking. So for my second class, I took philosophy of man. Honestly, I don't remember much about this class as well. If you really want to squeeze me with information, we did a lot of debates, which is not really my strong suit because I don't really like arguments, but I had to. Honestly, I don't remember much of the argument styles in terms of debating, and honestly, I don't need them right now. And on my third class, I took driving. I did learn a lot because I learned how to drive stick shift. I don't remember much right now because the car that I'm driving is automatic. Another memorable moment from this class is we did an excursion to LTO, which is pretty much like the DMV of the Philippines. So we just went there and then we got our student permits all together. So it was weird, but we went there as a class. We got our student driver permit. We'll be talking about a lot of classes because for this semester, I actually took 30 units. That's actually considered overload because the cap of regular load is supposed to be 28. So the first class that I took is qualitative and quantitative chemistry. Most of the schools call this analytic chemistry. I don't know. On this class, we learned about random computations like normality, molality, molarity, and like how to compute for the pH of certain compounds. What else do I remember? Well, lab experiments. We did certain experiments in regards to titrating EDTA. It's pretty much like titration during our general chemistry, and then the end color instead of pink was blue. This was also the first time where we handled an instrument called a spectrophotometer, which measures light, and this was also the first time where I had to use a analytical balance, and I don't remember much. For my second subject, I also took pagbasa at pagsulat tungo sa pananaliksik, which is basically Filipino 2. The most memorable project that I did here was a term paper in Tagalog, which was really hard to do because it's not like when you're making a term paper in English where Microsoft Word just corrects your spelling errors and like a little grammar errors, but it was really difficult because like there's no like specific word processing software that can handle Filipino words. And then our professor was not like, oh, you can choose any topic that you want. My professor actually wanted literature to be the main focus of our term paper. So to make it easier, we chose alamat, and then we had to extract the moral of the story, and if they're still relevant and if they're problematic, then we had to like present the negative effects of it in the term paper. It was a group term paper situation, which was really hard because let's just say they don't carry their own weight. Hopefully that won't be your experience on group work. So the next subject that I took is Philippine history. Not a lot of memorable things happened in this class because I feel like I was just relearning the same information that I learned in high school. I'm also taking it again because it's part of the general education classes. The next class that I took is Introduction to Medical Technology. Actually, this class is your make or break class because if you do exceptionally well on this class, then there's a high chance that you would actually do really well on CD. CD is actually what we call clinical division, and it's my university's fancy way of calling third year and fourth year students. So if you pass this class, then they would highly consider you to enter the clinical division year, and if you get a grade lower than C, then you have to repeat the class, or you'd be considered to shift majors because you already garnered a lot of C on various classes. There's not a lot of memorable moments in this class because we did not have a laboratory. Let's just say my professor introduced us to the different subjects that we will be taking. So there was this one chapter regarding like clinical chemistry, and then microbiology, blood banking, and so and so. My next class is PE 3. We had the option of choosing swimming, lawn tennis, table tennis, and badminton. I chose table tennis. I actually don't know know how to play table tennis once I entered this PE, but this was the only class that fits in my schedule because I wanted to take 30 units during this time and I had no choice. I remember we had to do like, say this is your racket and then this is the ball. You had to do 100 bounces for one of the quiz, and then we also had to learn how to serve. You have to serve in a way that it should hit a specific part of the table, because if it does not hit a certain part of the table, then you will not get the amount of points that you will need to get a good mark. And then we also had to duel each other. Like, we would be paired randomly each time we would meet. The higher your points, the better your grade, which explains why I did not get a good mark, because I really suck at table tennis. Yeah, let's move on. For my next class, it's Principles of Health. We learned about like the naturopathic way of like public health. That's pretty much it. The next class is Adventist Heritage, and in this class we learned about the history and how the Seventh-day Adventist denomination started, and we learned about one of the founders, which is Ellen G. White. That's pretty much it. The next subject that I took is Life and Works of Rizal, and if you guys don't know, Rizal is actually the national hero of the Philippines. This is like a more in-depth autobiographical way of studying him, his legacy, his life and works. The memorable project that we did for this class is we actually reenacted a part of his life. We were assigned the role of like Rizal and like his death and how he was put into trial. Actually, in this drama, I actually played Rizal, and it was hard because I am no actor by any means. And then he also wanted us to make a commercial, and then you have to advertise like one of the university's merch. The merchandise that we were doing a commercial for is a umbrella. So I had the idea of reenacting the whole Friends theme, and I will put some b-roll of like that commercial. So my next class is Society and Culture, and in this class we actually just learn about the different norms, cultures, and traditions of different countries. That's pretty much it. Another class that I took is Work Education 2, and I was a teacher's aide for one of my professors. What I did was basically just moderated for exams. I checked papers, I input grades on her Excel, just a bunch of like clerical stuff, and that's it. So on this semester, I took 30 units again. The first subject that I took is genetics. We learned about the structures of DNA and RNA, and we learned about like the stop codon and like the different protein groups that build one DNA. I don't remember much of the theory anymore, but genetics, it was really hard. My professor wasn't giving easy exams. He really wanted to challenge the students. Like, majority of the things he taught wasn't on the exam, but hey, that's college for you. So next subject is Fundamentals of Microcomputer Applications, and my professor taught us how to use the Microsoft Office, emphasis on Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, and then he taught us basic coding. To be honest, I don't remember much of the things I learned, because how I used Microsoft Excel before is still how I use Microsoft Excel now. For my next class, I took Biochemistry, and on this class, I learned about like carbohydrates and lipids and proteins and the different vitamin group. I remember during this class we had to switch professors before our pre-final exam. She was actually a professor in Texas. Actually, I really like the switch. My professor is so chill. She would say, okay, this is the type of exam where it's open notes, closed book, but if you crammed in all the information on this little index card, then you can actually pass. So for my next subject, it's Principles and Strategies of Teaching. The professor would teach you like teaching concepts and how you would apply it on different age groups and how your demographic affects your teaching style. The major requirement is really hard because we were split into groups. You had to ask for the consent of a certain classroom where you have to teach a certain disease. We chose the grade 7 demographic, and we had to teach a class, and for some reason my group mates wanted to do a lecture on eczema. It's really hard because it's a type of like disease where you don't really know where it's from. It just sort of happens, but we had to do it. Our next subject, it's Philippine literature, and basically read stories, made a book report, or sometimes like a story report. One of the memorable moments was when we watched Dekada 60, which is basically explaining the history of the Philippines during the 70s. And yeah, it's a really good watch. If you guys haven't watched it, you should. Let's move on. Next subject is health economics, and to be honest, I don't remember much on this class. I know we did something about like opportunity costs, supply and demand stuff, and like the gross domestic product, gross national product, and economics jargon like that. The next class is PE4, and we had the option to choose volleyball, softball, or basketball. To be honest, this is one of my fear PEs that I didn't want to take. I ultimately chose volleyball because it's the least amount of contact and least amount of running that I had to do, because to be honest, I'm not really into exercising and fitness. I remember the same with table tennis. We had to do 100 like bounces of the ball in our arms, and then we were also taught how to serve. On my first serve, I remember like it didn't bounce to the opposite side of the net. It just like bounced up, like it bounced really high, because I didn't know how much pressure I had to do. I was just like really bad at volleyball, let's just say that. And then aside from that, we also had to compete against like another group, so we were randomly assigned into sets of groups and hopefully get good marks. So next subject is Daniel and Revelation. We studied about the parallelism between Daniel and the book of Revelation, and to be honest, it was more interesting and a little scary because it talks about end events. That's pretty much it. So for my last subject that I took, politics and governance, we just studied how the different branches of the government work. Yeah, that's it. Nothing really notable happened. That's sophomore year for me, and if you would like to see more of this type of content, clinical laboratory science content, then consider subscribing to my channel. Give this video a thumbs up because it would really help my channel grow. Comment down below if you have some more video content ideas that you would like me to do, and thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to wash your hands, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!